Good morning. It's Monday, November 7th. It's the day after we moved the clocks back. So we're no longer on daylight savings time. And there are actually 19 states in this country that are not observing daylight savings time this year. But I won't mention all of those states, and I'm not really here to talk about daylight savings time. What I want to talk about today, because tomorrow is election day, I want to talk about campaign funding and the absurdity of the way that we allow corporations to be treated as individuals. And we allow people to remain anonymous donors. I'm against those things. I'm against the amount of money that we spend on campaigns. I think there are better ways to put our money to use. I think this country needs some rules and regulations and dollar amounts set for each political office. So let's say you're running for a county executive or something like that. Maybe you should only be allowed to spend $2 million. And maybe if you're just running for some minor office, maybe you're only allowed to send $500,000 to get the job. And maybe you're running for president, you can only spend, say, $20 million. But the amount of money spent on campaign funds is ridiculous. Hundreds of millions of dollars that could be better used. So let's look at that. I want to take a closer look at all of these things. So if I step back and look at things, I believe that most Americans are fed up with the role of big money in the political campaigns. I think that most people will be happy with some kind of system where everybody's allowed to donate a small amount of money, but nobody can give millions of dollars to these people. So obviously, if we look at it, the campaign finance system is broken. It's running rampant. There's no control over it. You have super PACs, and you have non-profit organizations that are on the shady side that give away enormous amounts of money. And they get that money from the super wealthy and the big corporations. So, do we honestly believe that the people have a say in really what's going on? Do they really pick the candidates? I'm against the primary system also, but that's a whole other issue. So as long as we have a system where people who are not qualified to run for office can raise tons of money to keep themselves in the race, so to speak, they're never going to get this country straightened out. Because there's too much at stake. Why would a guy want to be an honest politician if he has to give up all of his campaign money that is flowing into his coffers, right? So we need regulations to eliminate illegal spending. I mean, there's foreign money that comes into this country to finance some of these people. We don't know anything about that. And what about the Supreme Court with their ridiculous rulings? There were ridiculous rulings that weaken crucial areas of protection. When the Supreme Court allows a corporation to be considered a person, and corporations have much different views on the world than people do. So if you have a corporation, say in the coal mining industry, and I'll use that as an example because of the way Joe Manchin operates. So you have a coal mining company that can give millions of dollars to Manchin as their candidate. He's not going to do anything to prevent climate change for one big issue. But that's just one example. There are many other examples out there where the money that is donated for an individual corporation or an industry to survive, or not even survive, just to make more money. So if you look at the situation where a handful of wealthy donors dominate electoral giving and electoral spending in the United States, we need to have limits on campaign finance. And we need to have transparency. We need to know who is spending this money, who is giving this money out. Do we want people handing out tons of money in secret? What have they got to hide? If they're legitimate and they have a legitimate cause, what are they hiding from? So I believe that if you give more than X dollars, you should put your name on it. Sign the check and let everybody know you gave $1 million to some clown. Or your corporation, which is now a person, gave $1 million to some. And then you can have public financing behind that. But critical to this whole mess should be a limit, a different limit on every single office. Local offices, smaller amounts of money. National offices, larger amounts of money. Because you got to reach more people. But not hundreds of millions of dollars. Like I said before, maybe 20 million might be the cap. And let's not forget that this system, this finance system, the campaign finance system, unfairly favors these wealthy donors. Because they're going to pick a candidate that's looking out for their interests as opposed to the interests of his constituency. Now, it may very well be that in the coal mining situation, the constituency is the same as Manchin's. But in many cases, the constituency would not necessarily favor the wealthy donor's position. Because we have large corporations that have regional locations. And they're not interested in the people who live in those regions necessarily and work for them in those regions. They're worried about their national image across the whole nation. So just because you're operating a business in a local facility in, say, the state of Kentucky, that doesn't mean you're in favor of the people in Kentucky. You're doing something for your corporation and it's national. So that's what campaign funding is. It's bribery. There's no other word for it. It's bribery. So when I think about this issue, and I recognize the fact that the Citizens United case that went before the Supreme Court and ended up with all these unfair laws with respect to campaign financing, that law needs to be overturned in some way, shape, or form. But I doubt that can happen with the shape of this Supreme Court, and this Supreme Court is going to be around for a long, long time. So I think it's up to the communities to figure out a way to get around these ridiculous rules and figure out a way in some kind of local constituency to affect the amount of money that is delivered into the hands of these super PACs and not-for-profit so-called funds that allow unqualified people to run for office. And we also have to watch out for foreign spending. Money that comes in from outside the United States and somehow or other makes it into the campaign coffers of some candidate. I call them a candidate, but I'm not sure that they're more than lackeys for the people that put money in. That's probably what all of these people are. If they have large donors and they have to kowtow to them, they're not politicians. They're not out for the people that vote for them. They're lackeys, servants of the wealth. I leave you with a mess, and I don't know how we're going to correct it. Just think about it. Have a great day. Bye.